Hello world and welcome back to KimchiRobotics. I'm your host, Kimchi. And today I'd like to cover a common question that often gets asked to anybody who has dabbled in coding, programming, or hardware, electronics, anything like that, any sort of skill like that, because it's very, very difficult and it takes a lot of discipline to actually get rolling. You need to build up momentum, and it's very hard to do that as a beginner. It's a very difficult thing to learn. It's several things at once, basically. You have the hardware components, you have the electrical component world that you have to deal with, and then you have to deal with the actual code world. And that's like learning a new language plus learning a new culture at the same time. So you have all of this stuff combined at once. It ain't easy. I often get asked, what's the best way to learn coding and electronics? And that's a loaded question. A lot of people go to school for that. They spend a lot of money going to college or get a master's degree or even, a PhD in computer science or other related fields. And they spend a lot of their life, 4 years or more, trying to learn that exact thing. And most of us here are trying to learn how to do it for free. Let me explain to you my favorite way to learn, and hopefully that helps you all get an idea going of how you would approach this problem and how you would solve it. There's two major ways to go about this. The first one, of course, is traditional books, magazines, print materials, basically. There are certain pros and cons that I'll go over, and the other way, of course, is learning online, electronically, connected to the internet, basically. With books, the first thing you're gonna run into is the money, the paywall. Obviously, books are going to cost a little bit more. They range from anywhere from about $10 to as much as $60. It depends on what you're getting into. I don't recommend you going with any sort of textbook. That is not what you're going to like. Most people don't even do well with textbooks in school. So don't do that. The other thing you'll notice is the books, the print materials, they can get lost, they can get damaged, obviously. So if you pay $30 for a book and you lose it, you gotta buy it again. The next thing that I would point out is they're very easily and quickly outdated. An example of this is a book that I bought, which is a great book. It's called Automate the Boring Stuff with Python. And I think it's by Al Swigert. And he has some YouTube videos basically explaining the tutorials, and I think you can get all the lessons that are exactly in the book for free on his website. Automate the Boring Stuff with Python. Search for that. And it's a great book. He does a great job explaining, but I noticed immediately when I bought it that the version he was teaching was like Python 2 point something, and there was a much later version of that, and some of the code you'll run into doesn't work. And that's the one major downfall of print materials, traditional books and magazines, is you're gonna have to deal with that and you're gonna have to figure it out. You're probably gonna have to Google a few things, and then you'll realize it's nothing major. It's just a little syntax, like they changed the way that they word something for some reason. That is the main thing I've run into. Some programs that were written for Python 2 don't work with Python 3. The one thing that you're going to be more safe with is a legacy type language like C. That's not really changed that much. They don't really change too much. That's kind of a set in stone kind of thing, but with more evolving modern languages like Python and others, you're going to run into that issue. So keep that in mind. The next con that I have for traditional print materials are you don't get in the habit of asking questions very much. However, the other side of that coin is you're less dependent on others and you assume a little bit more responsibility. You put a little bit more effort into your problem solving. So if you have a code issue that you don't understand, you're going to be more self-reliant and try to really think about how to solve that problem. And you're gonna have to go in and you're gonna have to just methodically go through the code and think about what you're doing wrong in order to make it right. So that is a kind of a double-edged sword deal. Now, the rest of the pros for the books, and books are my preferred method of learning pretty much anything. It's easier on the eyes. This hobby requires you to constantly be looking at a computer screen, flashing this light into your eyes, and a lot of it's blue light. And the damages that screens can cause is well documented. If you can get anything in dark mode, if there's any websites, in dark mode, get that. But books are always going to be easier on the eyes. You'll find yourself more easily isolated, and you'll be able to focus more if you have a book and you don't have any headphones on. You just go somewhere, get your coffee or your soda or whatever, go outside, sit on a bench, sit on a thing. What are those called? Chairs. Just read. You can have a laptop. That's how I like to do it. I like to have a laptop that's kind of weak so I don't play games. That's a big distraction, right? I try to not listen to YouTube music unless I really know what I'm doing, which is rare. It's more ASMR. The sound of the crinkling pages sounds good, and it smells so good. Don't you like the smell of a book? It smells so damn good. All right, moving on to the next one. For pros, for books, you don't need batteries. You're never gonna run out of batteries. You do need light, obviously, but you're never gonna run out of batteries. So the next major pro of having a magazine or a book is you're going to be able to write notes directly on that source material. And that will save you a lot of time. It's kind of like having a notebook on steroids, basically. And it'll help you to get absorb those concepts better and retain them much better. And you'll have your photographic memory also working hand in hand, so you can really get that information. And if you need to open up and review it, like you're looking for an answer, you just open it up and you have all your notes and how you write like how you came to understand that concept, because sometimes the concepts are still really hard. And if you write your discovery of how you started to understand that concept, boom, it's right there. And then you can help somebody else. The next pro that I would emphasize is when you learn from a book or a magazine, the code is more likely to work with the hardware. And the reason, I believe, is it takes much more time and money to produce something like a book. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of revision and just a lot of thought. The authors tend to make more effort with books. Not all books are perfect, obviously. They tend to be more correct, especially if you have the same version, of the coding language that you're going to be using. Like if you're using Python 2.7, then make sure you use Python 2.7, whatever. It's guaranteed to work pretty much every time. So that is it for the books. Moving on to the internet and electronic means of digesting and learning how to code and program electronics and robotics. Man, this is a hard topic, and a lot of people I think are gonna be very sensitive about this issue, because you have basically the whole generation of programmers and coders that have brought up with 4G and 5G and Wi-Fi available everywhere. A lot of younger folks will think, oh, that's the way it should be. Of course, that's just the way it is. Let me get into the pros first before I go to the cons. So obviously, you're gonna have a lot of free material to access, and sometimes you just have to keep digging and digging on the internet, and you do searches or you go to YouTube videos. There's a lot of, or other sites, there's a lot of great material that you can learn from. The only thing is, videos take a lot of time. Even my simple videos of how to move a servo or blink an LED, I noticed they were very long, and that reminds me, this video is turning out to be longer than I expected as well. You're gonna run into a bunch of free material, mostly, and you'll find that you'll get so far in the free material and then that paywall shows up. There's gonna be a paywall eventually, and they're gonna want your money. And they're gonna say, hey, you wanna learn how to do this and that? And you're gonna be like, oh yeah. They're gonna want your money, and there's no guarantee that it's going to help you or work in your favor. So it's kind of like, the same thing with books. You have the paywall there, you gotta pay to get the book, but then once you have that book, you got it. So the second pro I have for online material is it's instantly available. It's accessible anywhere 24/7. It's only going to go away if something happens to the website, or they don't pay for their renewal for the domain, etc., etc. So that's one of the risks with those. I've had that happen to me, and then one of the websites is always flagged as malicious now. I don't know, I just stopped using it. I don't care anymore. I moved on. The third pro I have, these sites that you visit to learn how to code and make things are gonna be more up to date, more with modern trends, so to speak. The changes are generally made as they go and as people complain in the comment sections, because they're pretty much works in progress. You kind of get what you pay for with that. So there's going to be errors in the code, and people will point it out. And usually if the person's on the site updating it, unlike me, they're going to make those changes pretty quick. But then again, later on, there's going to be, more broken code because maybe the language gets a complete major update, major overhaul, maybe a syntax thing even. Now let me get into the cons. I have spent a lot of my free time looking for help on the internet and trying to learn on the internet, and it was mostly miss more than it was hit. I've had more success with books personally, and let me explain why. The problem with being free internet source material is it's going to be very easily produced, and it's more likely to not work. The reason for this is there are so many sites that are just copycats of one another, and they're trying to do the same thing, and they're copying and pasting each other's code to compete for the same traffic. And that's what I found out early on when I was making my website, roboticsforbeginners.com. My website right now is very bare bones, and I focus mainly on trying to explain the electronic component concepts in kind of layman terms. And I want to add code later, but I didn't want to just be another cookie cutter computer out there for the same internet traffic. And this is a very niche thing as it is. I mean, coding is a big topic, and it's gained a lot of momentum in recent years. However, I mean, look at the average person. You think they're gonna go home after working all day and sit down and, let me find out how to program this servo to flush my toilet for me. It's not really gonna happen. So we're not at that point in society yet. Maybe later. Maybe 1,000 years later. So the second major con that I have for the online internet way of learning is you immediately fall into this habit of dependency. You're immediately dependent upon others for your success. The way you got to that point where you're gonna find a site that you're gonna learn from is you Googled it, right? And then you may have asked around, you asked people like me what the best way to learn was. So you're in this habit of asking others how to solve your problems. And you get this dependency on Google and places like Stack Overflow or Quora. I'm surprised that's still around. You end up copy pasting a lot of your code and then asking others why it doesn't work. And they ask you, well, what's your specs? Oh, what's your, show everything. Oh, you didn't include this. They'll point out all these problems that you have, and you'll come across a lot of very salty individuals. And a lot of them went to school, they're like, hey, why don't you know this? Like, figure it out on your own. I had to figure it out. So you better be prepared for that. Learning on the internet, like I said before, is not easy on the eyes. I feel very strongly that you need to protect your eyes. Some people, they use blue light filter sunglasses. Some people turn on the blue light filter on their phones. I do personally. There's something about the LEDs bouncing off the back of your retinas that can't be good long term. So my hope and my dream and my prediction is soon, when we make it economically feasible, everything's gonna switch to color e-ink. So they've already come out with e-ink displays that can display color, and I think this is a great step. When you look at an e-ink display, you'll notice that there's like no backlight or something like that, and it feels like you're looking at a page. I don't know what the solution is to the backlighting issue, but I mean, it's just a good step in the right direction. Maybe we have to turn on lights, and maybe we'll go to filling up the room with light when we need to look at a screen. I don't know what the answer is, but cut back on your screen time. So let me share with you what kind of books that I've purchased and what I'm reading these days in order to give you a kind of an idea of what's available in print form and why I like it so much better than just going on the internet and looking for tutorials and answers to things. So as you can see, I have some books here. I read books and I read books. The first book that I ever got on programming, and it was because my internet journey failed over and over and over. It was always something different. Every website had something different, a different way of explaining something. Even with my chip that I was using, the AVR Atmega 328P, which is found in the Arduino. I didn't like the Arduino language. It was difficult for me to understand what was happening, even though it was like too easy. And so I didn't understand what was going on because I like to understand what's going on You know what I mean? So I got this book, and it's by Make. Make has an excellent library of print materials to choose from, and you can even download them, you know, the Kindle version. So I'm not hating on digital books and stuff like that. I like just book format. I feel like there's more that usually goes into it, especially if they're going to print it. But this is by Elliott Williams, and this book was fun to read. It was really difficult. He goes through everything that you need to know as a beginner. And I don't want to give away, you know, like I don't want to show you every page, but you know, they have code, and he's got, you know, explanations of stuff, and he is one of the best teachers that in this field, I think, because I think he learned it as a hobby, and he is a great teacher to learn from. He goes through some very basic to very advanced concepts, and I still haven't mastered this book, and I've had it for quite a few years, couple years, maybe 5 years now. I don't know, 6 years. It's been a while, but you can see I like to write directly on to the book to explain. And then here, look, I have this victory note right here. It works. So I highly recommend a book like this. This is a very niche programming book, but at the time, I think it was a very sought after niche within a niche. Is that a niche? I highly recommend you get it. I always link it in my description of my videos, because I feel like even if you're not studying that chip, he explains everything so well that you're just going to understand a bunch of concepts. And a lot of the peripherals, like, you know, timers, counters, interrupts, those are applicable for other chips and other boards like you find with the Raspberry Pi. So highly recommended. My favorite book to this date. All right, moving on to the next one, we have the Raspberry Pi Beginner's Guide. And this was produced by BDM. I got it for 20 bucks. So my other book, this book is a solid book, and it's worth the price. It's worth that price. You'll probably find it cheaper as on a Kindle version, but like I said, I like to take notes, and I like to take it everywhere. This book is more of a magazine. I'll call it a bookazine. I think that's what they call it. This is a very good introductory one to the main, you know, the larger Pi boards, and it also covers, you know, the W and the 0, and it has some really good diagrams if you like that stuff. And this book helped me with Linux. Okay, I think this book's main focus is Linux and how to move files and stuff like that, and that got me started and gave me the confidence to get going with that. I think I ran into one typo error that was in this book, but other than that, I mean, it's just screenshots of, you know, going through how to do it. And then it has some Python projects, and then it has some Raspberry Pi projects in here, and some very cool stuff. Very cool stuff. Is it the best? No, it's more of a kind of wet your feet. You know, like if you want to learn how to, if you want to feel comfortable with the chip and understand kind of what it's used for and what you're capable of doing with it, I recommend getting this if you want to go the main, you know, normal Raspberry Pi route. Not necessarily the W or the Pico. It doesn't have any information on the Pico. This is printed before that. So the next one that you can get this for free online. You can get this series for free. I usually just, you know, download it as a PDF from their site, and you can donate and support if you want. But I wanted to check out the print version myself, and I believe it was, you know, $17. This one is more of a preview and an overview of projects you can do. I think it looks good. It's clean. You know, you're able to follow it. Again, I don't want to, you know, like get in trouble for just showing too much, but it's a great little magazine that shows you different projects. And I noticed that they don't have the actual, so you go in here and then you type in that address, and in the PDF version you click on it and it'll pop up with a link to like their own website or wherever you can find, you know, the actual code and more details of how to get it going. And I think this is a good thing. I think this is cool, and it gets different makers from, you know, around the makerspace together and puts it into a very nice feeling, you know, there's some texture here. A very nice little magazine. I really like that. It says your official Raspberry Pi magazine. Guess it's official. So I recommend that. I just want you to know what it is and what it isn't. So this is more of a magazine. This is interesting. Okay, so you can go to the bookstore and you'll usually see they have these kinds of manuals, and they all look like this. I believe this one was it says bookazine. There you go. That's where I learned the term. This one was printed by somebody. It's an unofficial guide to Python, and I feel like I had to shift to Python from C programming because have you looked at the prices and the availability of the chips? They're saying the Atmega 328P chips are not going to be available until next year. Can you believe that? So there's definitely a supply chain breakdown there and a lot of delayed orders. So I started to move on to like the Pico and to the Python programming language, and I really, really like this bookazine. It has all kinds of stuff, both Raspberry Pi and not Raspberry Pi related. And look at that, it's just beautiful. I mean, look at that. That looks incredible. And I believe they do have it in downloadable format, and they teach all the concepts of coding, like, you know, functions, variables, operators, and they explain it really well. The only problem I had with it was teaching a concept for developing an app with, it uses a lot of these third-party apps and software and websites. Like one is called Kivy, and you need Kivy to be able to use Python to develop an app. Basically, it's like kind of like a middleman that lets you do a lot of stuff with Python that you can put on like Android devices. And I found out that it was out of order. They had this concept of Kivy, and I was looking like where to download Kivy, like where does it say how to do it? Because usually it says what you need and, you know, where to go, how to set it up to make the program, and it wasn't there. And it was later on. It was later on in the book. So I think they just had that out of order. But other than that, I love how it's small, it's tiny, and it just sounds amazing. Like, you hear that? Oh yeah. I mean, that's just, I could make a whole YouTube channel. Oh yeah, that's great. So this one set me back 18 bucks. So yeah, about 15 to, you know, 18 US dollars is what these bookazine types are gonna set you back. This is not a textbook, but it is better than a textbook, and it is going to set you back a little bit more. If you're using something else, like a different kind of chip, like a PIC 32 or whatever, get that, you know, like do whatever you want to do. My recommendation is to get whatever you want to do. Like if you want to be doing wireless stuff for the Raspberry Pi Zero W, do that. That's the big mistake that I made in the beginning. I was like, well, I need to understand everything. I got to understand how that works and this works. And well, I'm using this chip, but you know, I was trying to do too much. You need to just go real slow, because once you get those early concepts, those initial concepts like this one covers, you're going to be much better off. You're going to start gaining your momentum faster. You're going to have more confidence, and you're going to be able to relax and just problem solve. And that's another big thing about coding in general, especially with electronics. I mean, you got to deal with electronics, you know, setting that all up, doing your wiring, understanding, you know, how much, what resistor you have to use where, and you know, you get used to that after a while, and then you got the whole coding aspect as well, and that's why it's so difficult. So just go slow, you know, just light up some LEDs and then think about how you can light them up differently, and then change the speed, and then alternate different stuff, and then make like a traffic light out of that, and then add a button later. Just do like that. I think that's the best advice I would give to you. But these are the types of print materials that I enjoy, and I hope the next Dune movie doesn't suck. I hope this gives you an overall view of the pros and cons of both options of print material like books, bookazines, magazines, and the internet route. Stay tuned because I'm going to show you how to code and use the popular 7-segment LED component. This thing looks very retro, it looks great, and you can use it for counters, timers, and I'm going to show you how to program it in C. See you there. And stay grounded.
Next time, bring me a snack.